So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Boy, and I'm a student in the English Letters Department of Universitas Santo Dharma, Indonesia. In this occasion, I would like to present my findings in a research I've just conducted entitled Contested Spaces, Entanglement of Chinese Migration, Gender Discrimination, and Colonial Resistance in Olivia Ho's Working Woman. So I would like to start with my introduction on how the anthology's editors and Southeast Asian scholars as postcolonial practitioners have an immense role of maintaining the circulation of postcolonial texts. And later, I'm going to elaborate on how multicultural steampunk emerged as a mode of representation and a form of activism. So in 2008, what maps out the two major bodies which contribute to the underrepresentation of Southeast Asian post-colonial text. Those two post-colonial practitioners are anthologies editors and Southeast Asian scholars. And in regard to the anthology editors, to be particular, they select and classify which texts are deemed, let's say, worthy or eligible to be published under the publishing house. Meanwhile, for the Southeast Asian scholars, the theme becomes vital here. So the Southeast Asian scholars are told to focus more on the occurrence of Cold War and the rise of capital that have become a major emphasis of intellectual discourses in the region. This happens largely as the post-colonial recollection is thought to inflict pain and inflict a sense of underdevelopment in which the region is portrayed by the West. Therefore, instead of focusing on the painful recollection of colonial history, they instead want to focus on how the economic development that is made possible by the capitalization of economy has paved a way for them to experience modernization and thus development and progress. Okay. Since more and more post-colonial texts are overlooked and not narrated in this research, I would love to use the chance to uplift the significance of post-coloniality of post-colonial text. And here I'm using a steampunk fiction as a mode of representation. So first we have to understand what steampunk is. So the Oxford Dictionary of Science Fiction defines it as a genre of science fiction with a historical setting in the 19th century, characterized by technologies extrapolated from science of that era, but which were not invented at the time. And there is a distinct stream that I'm using, which is a multicultural steampunk. So what is it? It is actually a form of resistance activism. So steampunk has always been associated with European entailments and whiteness. The setting, the Victorian British is often associated and narrated to be the default setting of steampunk fiction and aesthetics. And here, the emergence of multicultural steampunk actually denotes that, as Go states in 2011, that the European and whiteness are not the only archive available to use as the source of steampunk fiction, steampunk narratives. So sources coming from non-Eurocentric histories exist, and she believes that the creator of steampunk should not restrict themselves using the default setting of Victorian British or the European entailments. Therefore, they need to use their own material history as the source of the fiction. And here I am using Olivia Ho's Working Woman as my main object, which is compiled in a steampunk anthology entitled The Sea is Ours, Tales of Steampunk Southeast Asia, edited by Jaymee and Joyce Chng, published in 2015. So here the results and the discussions of my study. There are 3 sub-discussions that I found. The first is Chinese migration, the second is gender discrimination, and the third is colonial resistance. Okay, so the Chinese migration here mainly deals with the establishment of Kongsi, which is a secret society in Singapore. So there is actually a difference between the Kongsi in mainland China and in Southeast Asia, especially in Singapore. So in mainland China, Kongsi was established as a form of activism. It was more political, as it was meant to topple the ruling dynasty. Meanwhile, in Singapore, Kongsi acts more as a economic affiliations, but then both operate within kinship-based system in which clans from the same province unite themselves and formulate Kongsi. And later, I'm going to show how grandfather, as the head of the Kongsi, is presented. Okay, here I want you to focus on the red highlighted words, sentences. These red highlighted sentences signify that economy matters and it is crucial. And here we can find oaths and allegiance. So initially, why allegiance and oath-taking ceremony became important was that because the first objective of Kongsi was pivotal. It was to topple the ruling dynasty, so it was not trivial stuff. Therefore, here it is previously stated that there is a slight change of focus, since the Southeast Asian Kongsi focuses more on the economic affiliations, but then they use this framework, the framework of allegiance, although that they have different objectives, but they use the same gist of framework, the framework of Kongsi, which is allegiance. Okay, and now I'm going to move to another finding, which is gender discrimination, and later colonial resistance. And I found that there are 4 sub-points that I could find. The first one is Confucian patriarchal system. Second is double colonization. The third is resistance to systems, and fourth, the resolutions. Okay, the first, we are given an instant on how here the grandfather here, as the head of the Kongsi, orders an agent to capture a hybrid. A hybrid means a half human, half robot. And here it is stated that the hybrid was a government property, which happens to be the British. It has to be noticed that this short story is taking a setting in British occupation in Singapore. Okay, and here the setting has shifted, and it marks the encounter between Ning Lam as the agent and the hybrid. And previously, because both encountered, we are here presented with how here the hybrid, which will later be known as Ahong, meet a Malay woman named Khairunisa, and later Khairunisa will house her and will preserve her. Okay, it is stated that Ahong has hulking shoulders, and had to be nearly 2 meters tall. Remember that this is a steampunk fiction, and it is possible for the for author to create a unique character which takes form as a hybrid person, half robot and half human. Now here we are presented with the direct encounter between Ning Lam and Ahong. So both the setting shows the animosity between Ahong and Ning Lam, despite the fact that both are oppressed within the system, within Confucian system that is represented by Kongsi, and by the colonial system undergone by the colonial system demonstrated by the British colonization. Here I am using Hook's accounts on how women are not able to formulate a solidarity. So she states that male supremacist ideology encourages women to believe that they are valueless and obtain value only by relating to or bonding with men. And they are not taught that their relationship with one another diminish rather than enrich their experience as women. They are taught that women are natural enemies, which was previously seen regarding the relationship between Ahong and Ning Lam. And that solidarity will never exist between us because we cannot and should not and do not bond with one another. So I think this particular passage shows how women are meant to operate within the framework of men. And here they are connected. They here are Ning Lam and Ahong. Both are connected within colonial system and Kongsi, to be exact. Okay, here we can see the animosity. Ning Lam proposes a peace. Meanwhile, here Ahong shows a disbelief, distrust toward the proposition. We ought to kill her. I can carry the body easily. Okay. And last is resistance. We can see that later the colonial system the colonial force can be toppled by the native informants who take forms as Gurkha, and later they would murder the colonial force largely but as the contribution from the hybrid Ahong and Ning Lam as an agent. And here, as for the relation between Ning Lam, the characters, and the Kongsi, there's an exchange of power in the final part of the short story. So the Ning Lam demands for her pay, while grandfather has declined the appeal, as the people who want the hybrid have died. And here it is stated that Ning Lam states how far the secret societies have fallen. They can't even pay contract for what they order. Thought you were old school in this Kongsi, but you are cheap as any upstart group. In here, Ning Lam shows that there is a power that is actually embedded within her consciousness, and it could only be achieved by her having to undergo the previous things that I've just said. So the conclusion of my study is that although there are three different sub-discussions, it shows the linearity of sub-themes in Olivia Ho's Working Woman as a parallel history of colonial Singapore that cannot be separated within the framework of the short story. Thank you.